Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome into Unanchored Boston with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch, and as always, our show is brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. George Gray's Lexington Toyota, a good friend to us and a good friend to everybody else. All right, Bob Lobel, you always handle the intros. You got a great one right here. You can never have enough mics on the show. And we get two of them today, so take it away, Lobel.
Too many mics and plenty of Harvards, I can tell you that. One too many Harvard.
It's not me.
No, it's not you, and it's not me either. It's all right. Here's the deal, Mr. Milbury. It's great to have you here, but I'm going to go right back. I had to find out last night what day Christmas Eve fell on back in 1979, December 23rd, and was on a Sunday night. And what was convenient about that is that, of course, you didn't know it, but went a long way to launching my career. It was one of the first nights that I was on television on Channel 4 doing the sports. And it was Christmas Eve, the 23rd of December, a Sunday night. And the Sunday night sports featured a game the Bruins played against the Rangers in Madison Square Garden. And of course, you know the situation, you know the story, some of the great video of all time. And if Lynch, you will tell you that there's nothing better for a sportscaster than to have great video. And so right out of the gate, I was brought into this crazy world of broadcasting. As you know, it's a crazy world. With some of the best video was possible, and you were a big part of that. Stan Jonathan was number one over the boards. Well, he was the one who was cut. No. O'Reilly was number one.
Yes.
O'Reilly went into the stands because Jonathan got cut by a paper something from a fan, or right?
Well, one of the fans reached over and grabbed Jonathan's stick. The two teams were milling about. It was after the game was over. And just by way of explanation, I was not on the ice.
No, you were in the locker room.
I was in the locker room because in Madison Square Garden at that time, they'd throw anything at you. You know, they'd throw bottles, they'd throw vodka bottles or cigarette lighters or whatever they could get their hands on. There was no security to speak of. And so we won the game. I mean, Espo had a breakaway with like 10 seconds left. I don't know if you remember that. And somebody threw a tennis ball right in front of him, and he always claims that's why he missed the breakaway against Cheevers. Anyway, we win a big game. I'm happy. I leave the ice, but Al Secord was skating past some Rangers, and he kicked out the skates of Ulf Nielsen. So John Davidson, their goalie, got really ticked off, skated down. Now all of a sudden, both teams are milling around, minus me. I'm in the locker room looking at the cold Budweiser on ice, and this guy reached over, grabbed Stan Jonathan's stick. Remember, the glass was really low at that time. It wasn't like it is today.
Well, you changed all that.
Yeah, we did have a part in that. And Terry, not being a person of sane state of mind.
Why did you say he wasn't shy? Okay.
Oh, no, he wasn't shy. Took offense to the fact that the guy had stolen Jonathan's stick and climbed up the glass and went after him. And of course, the captain leads the way for everybody else to climb up into the stands. And the next thing you know it, there's, half the team is in the stands. And by the way, they were doing a serious number and a bunch of fans down below. None of that got caught on camera enough to get them, charged criminally. But there was some serious stuff going on down there. So about this point, I
Cab of all people jumps in after O'Reilly.
Yeah, that's right. And, I was in the locker room. Cheevers came in and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Where is it?" I said, "Where is everybody?" He said, "There's some sort of beef going on." So I'd already taken my helmet off and my gloves were off and the stick was gone and probably had the cold Bud in my hand by now. But I ran back out to the ice surface, and I never made it to the ice surface because I saw all the guys in the stands. So I just walked up the stairs in my skates, and I have to tell you that it was a pretty good moment in a weird kind of way. I first of all, I was happy going home for Christmas, big win. Now I come back out and there's complete chaos in the stands, and I have no idea what's going on or why I should be there, except that my teammates are there, and I got to go there and sort of help out, I guess. And so I went from this happy state of mind to my heart racing like 1,000 beats a minute. It was just like, but walking through the crowd, you know, I've shrunk a little, but I was about 6'2" at the time and on skates. And I had the feeling that they weren't so interested in engaging with us at that point, because we were with all the equipment on and all that, and we looked like giants heading into the stands. So it was a little bit of a macho rush for me. But I get into the stands and I see Peter, who I sat beside in the locker room. He's about 12 rows up, and he's got the guy backwards over a chair. And I just went up there because I didn't know what else I was supposed to do. I was just trying to help out my teammates. And I got up there, and the guy was sort of flailing away a little bit, probably not as much as I made it out to be. And I just grabbed his leg, and I don't know what, I wasn't really thinking. He sort of lashed out a little bit. I grabbed his leg, shoe came off, and I did a little double pump, and then I hit him on the thigh. I didn't hit him on the head. I didn't, damage the guy. And then the worst thing I did was I then took the shoe and threw it on the ice. So the guy had to go home with one shoe on and one shoe off. Little dumpling, my son John. And it was a cheap penny loafer too, I might add. So I did really very little damage to him, but because we were 12 rows up, the camera had panned into where Peter and I were. Easily could see that it was a melee below, but it panned right in on Peter and I. So for the next 3 days, I was a villain extraordinaire. Man goes crazy in the stands, hitting somebody with a shoe. I mean, it was the top of the news throughout the whole weekend.
Well, you weren't a villain in my mind, believe me. You made a career.
So
yeah,
it was wild. I still I think about it and I chuckle a little bit, but the aftermath of that was pretty serious. They sued us for $7 million. The guys that started the fight in the stands, it was a father and his two sons. I think all three of them are now deceased, but that suit got thrown out. But the worst part of it was we were suspended, Terry for 7 games, me for 6, and Peter for 6. And we actually appealed it to the full board of governors. And our lawyer made an excellent case. And there was a lot of discussion and a lot of sympathy for what had happened in terms of the board of governors. But if you think about it, if they had overturned John Ziegler's ruling, probably would have been the kiss of death for him. So they upheld the ruling, and I'll never forget him. Skipping out of the room like a little schoolgirl. Sorry if I can say that. I can say whatever the hell I want. I'm already canceled.
Right. You've managed to offend just about everybody already.
So 6 games it was, and it was a long 6 games, and it was tough. But the end result was every December 23rd, it comes on like clockwork. It's a Christmas tradition in Boston, and I'm happy to be a part of it, Bob and Mike.
Yeah, well, I was happy.
Like A Wonderful Life, it's coming on sometime. Milbury with the Shoe is coming on after A Wonderful Life.
Well, it was when we left the building that night, there was a huge crowd outside, and they were actually surrounding the bus and rocking the bus and, making half-hearted attempts maybe to get at us. But that was probably the scariest part of the whole event for me was, you got 1,000 fans hanging around the bus, rocking it and hurling all sorts of epithets at you. But we made it out safely and had a good Christmas, but then the shoe fell, literally and figuratively.
We had Nate Greenberg on about a month ago, and he was picking up the story from when you left Madison Square Garden. And he said, Nate had arranged for a police escort to either the tunnel or a bridge. And the police took you right there, and they stopped at the entrance to the tunnel. And either Harry or Nate, went up to opened the door and waved to the guys, "Hey, thanks a lot." And the cop turned around.
New York.
Yep, New York, New York.
Those were you had some pretty tough guys on the team that you played with. Winsink and Jonathan, yourself,
O'Reilly.
I mean,
Schmaltz. It was a long list.
Yeah, you guys had some pretty tough guys back when the game was the game.
We, it's the 100th anniversary, right? So they're honoring different eras of Bruins teams, and we're being honored on December 16th, I think, for the lunch pail era, which is, it's a sad thing we can't bring rings to the party. We came too close to doing that, but it was not to be. But I'm looking forward to seeing some of those guys. Unfortunately, some of them will not be with us. Peter McNabb in particular, who just recently passed away. Too good a guy and too young to go, but he fought a good fight against cancer, and in the end he succumbed. But he'll be sorely missed. But I'm looking forward to seeing some of these other guys. Like I can tell you, John was street tough.
Was he the toughest guy that you ever played with?
I have no idea how to measure that, but I can give you an example what kind of ruthless approach he had. He was in the minor leagues and he was playing in Providence, he told me, and he got into a fight with somebody. I don't know the name. And he said, I got on top of him and I had him down on the ice and I had my finger in his eye and right behind his eye, and I could feel cords, and I wondered, should I pull it out or not? And he said, I finally took it out, but I was close. He said I was close to pulling out his eyeball. That's tough.
Yeah, well, he was, lest people forget, he challenged the whole Minnesota North Star bench.
And you know what? I was the idiot standing beside him like 5 feet away thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I went over and stood beside him. And it was that's a great scene though, wasn't it? The two hands out on the side. Come on. Right. And no, he was he was a really sweetheart of a guy too. He was I don't know if I should I'll tell the story. What the hell?
Come on, why not?
Yeah. So we're going to the Garden. We're going to a concert at the Garden, with Harry and a few other people. Got a box someplace. So we were down on the floor, and Bette Midler was one of the performers. And I was with John and his wife, and Harry and his wife. And we were introduced to Bette Midler, and she looks at John and she says, I remember you, Kansas City, right? and Harry says, let me introduce you to John's wife, Fronda. Holy smoke. So anyway, a funny moment for sure.
But, you guys, 77 finals, 78 finals, and 79, one extra skater away from maybe going to the Stanley Cup Finals or winning the whole damn thing. Guys could have had three rings in a row. Yeah,
well, when you take a look at the roster the Canadians produced for those teams, I think there were nine Hall of Famers on the team. Dryden and Robinson, and Savard, and Lapointe, and you just keep on going. Lafleur, Lemaire, Steve Shutt. It was just it was deep as deep could be, but we inched forward in 77, lost in 4, then we lost in 6, and we had them. I don't know if you remember, we were up 3-1 going into the third period. They wound up, surprise, on the power play a couple of times and tied it up. And then Nifty scored a sort of weird wraparound goal against Dryden with just about 4 minutes to go in the game. And, I'll spring forward to about 20 years later. I think it was Doug Risebrough was on that Canadian team, told me they thought they were dead. They thought it was all over. They thought they were done. And then whatever happened on the bench, regardless of who was responsible, it was 14 seconds of too many men on the ice. You could see John D'Amico, the linesman, counting, trying to give us a break. I was actually leaning over the boards with my stick trying to hook somebody back into. I just couldn't get close enough to anybody to hook them back in. But the penalty was our fault, deserved, and the consequences were incredibly cruel. It was a drop pass from Lemaire to Lafleur, who didn't even hesitate, and just a wicked slap shot and beat Gilbert, who, speaking of deceased, just passed away, and was brilliant that night. But I could hear the sound of it dinging off the inside of the goalpost, and it was just like a knife in the heart. And we had some chances in overtime. We couldn't put it away. And then, the guy that scored the goal was Yvon Lambert, pass from Mario Tremblay. I had hit him in the first period as hard as I've ever hit anybody. In today's world, he would have been in concussion protocol for a week. I mean, the boards in Montreal were like cement, and I hit him. I caught Gary Doak was on the ice with me, and I kind of used him as a screen as Lambert went wide on Doak, and I stepped up and moved around Gary and hit him. Never saw me coming, and crushed him against the end wall. He was down for a long time. The bastard got up and scored the game winner about a couple hours later. It was, but anyway, there were a lot of tears on that plane ride home with some tough guys. It's hard to describe. It's the ultimate in my career in both good and bad. I mean, we should have been there. We were right there. And there's no question who was going to beat the Rangers. They lost the first game because they were so exhausted and sort of not ready to play. They had to play 2 days later or a day and a half later. And I think anybody that saw the teams knew that we were ready to win a championship, and we blew it.
Harry has a great line. There are three certainties in life: death, taxes, and the first penalty at the Forum will always be in favor of the Canadians.
Well, it was a weird time for our team because Harry and Grapes were at each other's throat. I mean, they were really, you could see that it was frayed. The relationship was frayed. It was too bad because they had been really close. I think they patched it up a little bit since then. But, I remember walking through the airport, going to the bus in Montreal, and Harry came up to me to discuss penalty killing and some aspect of it. I don't even remember because I got on the bus and Graves said, "What are you doing talking to him?" He's the general manager, for Christ's sake. He was talking about penalty killing, but it was Graves' last game as coach, and it was never more fun than playing for Don Cherry. It was simple rules. He was the only. Now they got 16 different assistant coaches, right? But with Graves, it was just him behind the bench, and he handled every practice, handled every game, and there was never more fun than it was to be playing for Don Cherry. Although I can tell you, I played one game in 75, I guess, but not much. I didn't get much ice time. They sent me back down, and I must admit, I thought I was going to make it in my first year out of Colgate, and they kept Doug Hallward because he was a number one pick, not based on performance, but based on potential. And I went to the minor leagues for a while and pouted, and was not a mature reaction on my part, but I thought I'd been slighted, and I still think I had been slighted. But anyway, I got called up. We were in New Haven on, I think it was a Wednesday night, and finished the game. And my coach, Dick Matusi from Rochester, called me over and said, you're being called up to play in Buffalo tomorrow. Now, if you check a map, the distance between New Haven and Buffalo is a long way. So we left at 11:30, whatever time it was. We roll in the wee hours of the morning. I caught a couple hours of sleep, and then made my way to Buffalo. And so Buffalo had a very good team at that point. They had the French Connection line, and they had some good players. And I thought I was doing okay. And Grapes came down to the end of the bench near the end of the first period, and he said, "Mike, what the fuck happened to you?" I looked at him and I said, "What do you mean, Don?" He said, "You college commie pinko faggot. Hit somebody." So, all right. So the second period comes, and now we're down in a hole, and it was end of the second period, same thing. "What's the matter with you? Go hit somebody, you college commie pinko fag." You know? And so they sent me down after the game was over. But they still needed somebody. I think they clinched the division, and they called me back really literally the next afternoon, and I drove up to Toronto, and I was by myself. All the other guys had gone out to the track, which they were wanted, with Cheevers leading the pack, of course. And I went next door to I didn't know where I was. I'd never been to Toronto. And I went to a place called the Stable Bar. It was 100 yards away from where we were staying. And I walked in, and they were all there. Like everybody was there. "Get over here, kid. Get over here, kid," throwing beers at me. And, it's the night before a game, right? And I'm not exactly I'm on thin ice as it is. So somehow, it wasn't that late. It was like 10 o'clock, 10:30. Cash got excited and broke a chair or hit somebody or did something stupid. And I had gone to the bathroom. And the next thing I know, I come back, and there's only like 2 or 3 of us left. I think it was Jill Gilbert and Dick Redmond. And who comes in the bar is Don Cherry, because the manager knew that we were staying next door, and he called and asked for Don. Said the guys are being a pain in the ass. You got to come back and get him. So he walks in, and he starts shaking his head, looking at me. And I just remember what he just told me in Buffalo the night before. And he said, he walks me back to the hotel the whole time. "Fucking rookie, hanging on by a thread. You're the only reason. I'm the only reason that you're here, and you embarrassing me. This is ridiculous." And so, anyway, we have a big team meeting the next day. He walks around, he's yelling at everybody, and then he comes to me. He's hovers over me. He's a big guy. And, "How many beers did you have?" And I said, I didn't know what to say. Then I said, "I think I had maybe 2. He just started laughing. But we play the game, and I get into a fight with Pat Boutet, who started a little smaller guy, but a tough little customer. But I cut him open for half dozen or so. And I get back to the bench after serving my time, and he's standing there at the opening of the bench, the gate, with his hands on his hips. And he looks at me and he says, "What did you do that for?" And I'm like, "What the hell? What did you do that for?" He said, "You just made me come in my nice new brown suit." Oh, you can't top that, can you?
No, but you know what? You were in a different era, Michael. Yeah. I mean, you guys were a different era, and you represented that era. I mean, NBC couldn't handle you.
No, well, they did for a while, and that's a different kettle of fish. But it was a really tight group. We really had a lot of fun. We went everywhere together, and later that same year, we were playing Los Angeles. And I was up and down like a yo-yo, but they called me up, and it was game 4 when Dallas Smith got hurt in game 3. I was just riding the plane and getting the free meals and stuff, but we got dinged up, and it was clear that they were going to have to play me. And Grapes told me I was going to play the next night. So where do we go after practice? Of course, we go back to the track. Everybody's at the track. And one of my highlights of that is that I looked up in the stands, and there was Farrah Fawcett. Now, this is like 1975, and she was smoking at that point, right? I knew I was in a different world when it came to that. And so the next night we play, and they get a 2-man advantage, 5-on-3, and he calls me to go out there. And they got the Triple Crown line. They got Dion and Charlie Simmer and Dave Taylor. And I it's 5-on-3, so you got to spread out, right? And it was a wing-to-wing pass to Marcel Dion, who could really snipe the puck. And I dove to my left, and Cheevers was way out of position. He had to be. It was a lateral pass, and there was no chance he was going to get there. And I caught it with my glove, hit my glove and knocked it away. Otherwise, it's a different story. And we won that game and came back to win it in 7. But I was, and my role diminished after Dallas came back. But it was a pretty cool moment to get that kind of responsibility from the coach, and we went on from there. It was never looked back.
When you went into coaching, and it's not because there's so much more I want to talk about as a player, but was Cherry the one that you really tried to emulate as a coach?
I don't think anybody could emulate Don Cherry. I mean, he's a one-of-a-kind individual, but my 2 favorite coaches were Grapes and Harry. Harry only for short stints after he fired somebody, but they both had a way of making you feel important. Grapes would give you roles like I just talked about in Los Angeles. He'd have fun with you. I mean, this is a guy that made me drive into the rink with him for pregame skates. So if we were playing on a Thursday night in the morning, we'd drive in, and I had no choice. I lived down the street from him in North Andover, and said, you're riding in with me today. So on the ride in, he would practice his pregame speech to me. So 3 or 4 times over, how's that going? How's that? I'm listening to him. I can't believe this is happening here. So by the time, we finish our pregame skate, and then we'd drive back, and every time we'd stop at the Kowloon. And Grapes, on game day, he'd make an order for himself or for Rose and the kids, and he'd have 2 Budweisers while we were waiting for for the order to come through. And he always ordered for us on the ride home an order of spare ribs. So we're just sitting in the car eating spare ribs and chucking them out the window. But after Grapes had 2 beers and he went home and had his nap, and then I went in and listened to his pregame speech for about the 5th time. But it was he just made it so much fun. It was just but he had a personal touch about him. And let me tell you one other story. I think I don't know if you've heard this one before, but you go into the rink, you're on Route 1, right? And it's two lanes going each way with that little narrow metal divider in the middle. And so we're going into the rink one day, and Grapes says, Mike, look at that weed over there. And I looked at the weed, and he said, that's a tough weed to be growing in that area, right? So every time we go into the rink, he said, Mike, that weed is a Bruin. That's a Bruin weed right there. And this is so now the calendar turns to April, and we've seen the weed plenty of times. It's like a best friend. But it's street cleaning time, right? And the street cleaners are out on the highway. And he said, Mike, we got to save the weed. And he said, you got to go over and get that weed. So he stops the car on this busy thoroughfare, there's hardly a breakdown lane. And I got to wait for a chance to dodge traffic to go over the little stupid metal barrier between the 2 roads. And I pry the weed out, and we rush to the gas station. He gets a newspaper, he wets the newspaper and saves the roots. And he goes home and plants it in his garden. 2 weeks later, I said, hey, Don, how's the weed doing? He said, well, Rose was in the garden and she was doing some weeding and she threw it out. But it was something to be with him. I mean, I could go on forever with him. We couldn't win in Montreal. Remember, we had all sorts of trouble winning in Montreal. So he decides that we need to change it up the night before the game. So we get into Montreal and we get to the hotel. And he said, okay, defense, you're coming with me. So we walk around the hotel to some little dive bar, and we just keep going. It's now 10 o'clock and nobody's had anything to eat. And we're not feeling too good the next day. And they squish us like a bug. And he calls the defense aside for a meeting, and he said, "You know what, guys? At least we tried." And one, I'll give you one last Don story. Well, we were in Atlanta, won a game. They were pretty hapless at the time. And we went out for a few beers and some to eat at a place nearby the hotel. And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and the manager comes out and tries to turn off the jukebox or whatever music that was playing. And that would be Grapes' favorite song. And Grape says, I just let me listen to the song and we'll get out of here. It's not a big deal. Just one song. And he said, "You got to leave right now." And he said, I got my bouncer here and he knows karate. And Grape says, "We're not going anyway till I hear the rest of that song." So this bouncer comes out, and he's ready. And Al Secords walks over to him and they have a little confrontation. And then boom, Al with a tough left and down he goes. I guess we heard the rest of the song, got out of there in a hurry.
Unbelievable. I remember one specific moment. It had to be in Pittsburgh. And you chased, is it Dennis Morrell? It might have been I'm not sure it was Morrell, but I know his name was Dennis, because all I remember is just you yelling at him, "Just another effing day at the office, Dennis. Just another effing day at the office." And there's this Boston College priest standing right there.
Right. I'm just going to say, I didn't know it. I had just come on. I was assistant general manager at the time. I wasn't coaching. But I had back surgery about 4 days before. This is my excuse anyway.
That's right.
It was a little, I had a disc problem and they took care of it. And I managed to get back up and go there. But we were getting screwed. And he was one of the worst refs in the history of refs.
It was Morrell, right?
Yeah, Denny Morrell, as he liked to call himself. But yeah, no, I never knew the priest was there until I saw the video later, which was that cost me 10 grand.
We got more laughs out of that than you could possibly imagine. Just another effing day at the office, Denny. It was.
Do you think if Grapes didn't get fired after that '79 season, you guys would have made a run or won a cup if he stayed on with that team?
It's hard to say, but I mean, we made 3 pretty good runs. The closest one, of course, in '79. But I think there was a good chance that we could have. I think Montreal ran out its string at that point. The Islanders were taking over, which is another story. I mean, we went from one dynasty to the next, playing against them in 1980. Another team loaded with Hall of Famers. And by the way, I mean, that was 1980 was their first year, right, as part of the run. So 79, 78, 79, 77, 78, 79, we lose to the champions. And now in 1980, we're playing the Islanders. And later I went to the Islanders and got to be somewhat friendly with Bob Nystrom. And he tells the story that they went to the Fours. He took Clark Gillies out to the Fours the night before the first game. And he said, we're never going to win this series unless we match up to them physically. And he said, I'll take care of Wensink and you take care of O'Reilly. And if we get through that, we'll beat these guys. And we lost. Cheesy didn't have a good series. He was not very good in that series, but we lost 5 games, I think it was, all close games, but never more brutal in terms of physicality. Terry and Gillies had, I think, 3 fights, one of which Terry was being restrained. His arms were being restrained by the officials, and Gillies just teed him up because he was free. I mean, and Gillies was a big man, a tough man. But, a different time, different timing, we might have won more than one, but, back-to-back dynasties were just a little touch more able to get the job done than we were.
Then you had Edmonton when you were coaching at the end of the '80s and into the '90s.
Yeah, they were. We went up in that series No, we weren't up in that series. We were in triple overtime in the first game of the series, and Glenn Wesley had an open net.
Remember that?
Oh my God! I mean, he could have turned. He went on his backhand. He had the time to go to his forehand, and he didn't. And then, of course, Peter Klima, who'd been sitting on the bench for 3.5 hours, comes in and scores the game winner against us, and they were the better team. You remember their fourth line was Adam Graves, Martin Jellin, and Joe Murphy, all guys, longtime professionals. That was their fourth line. Yeah. But we were outmatched in that one. I mean, we had a great season, but it really turned in game 2 when we had Poulin versus Messier. And Poulin, good checker, hard worker, got under Messier's skin, and Messier pushed him down and then cross-checked him viciously to the ice, and he blew out his knee. And then we just didn't have enough depth to stay with him. But it was, disappointing not to get more out of that one too. But there are a lot of guys in this game that were great players, like John Rattel or Brad Park, that didn't bring home rings, but still had great careers, and we had a lot of fun doing it. But I'm getting depressed speaking about this now.
Well, this year's team had a very similar fate, as you know.
Well, they didn't even make a whimper of a run. I don't know what happened there.
I was going to ask, okay, what was your analysis?
I don't think the coach was on his A game. I think everything was, I call him Mr. Rogers. Everything was, wonderful day in the neighborhood kind of thing. And I think when things got rough, he didn't know how to put the hammer down. And I think he made some poor choices in goal. I don't know if the goalie was hurt or what happened to him. I mean, but he was not 100%. He wasn't anywhere like he was in the regular season. They were late changing goaltenders to Swayman. I mean, what a tough spot to put the kid in game 7 after sitting there for 2 weeks. And, and Bertie, I don't know the real story of what happened, why he was playing in Montreal. Last game, probably thought it was going to be, his last game, and wanted to play in front of his family and friends one more time. Did he get hurt in that game? Was he hurt going into that game? I don't know. He shouldn't have been in that game. There's no way he should have been in that game. And he wound up either aggravating an injury or causing an injury, and that was a problem. And so it was a combination of things, but I felt bad most of all for the front office, to be honest with you. I mean, they went all in. They made Sweeney made some great moves to pick up people that would help him. He got some toughness in Hathaway. Orlov was, I thought, terrific as a pickup. I mean, he could argue he's certainly a number 2 defenseman on any team at that point. I knew he was pretty good, but I didn't know he was as good as he proved to be. And then who else? Bertuzzi. I mean, who thought Bertuzzi was? I mean, all of a sudden they looked like they were completely loaded and ready to go to work, and they just mentally weren't ready to play. And I point my finger at the coach. I mean, they couldn't get the job done. They had a good opportunity to get the job done. I mean, how many? 3 opportunities to finish it off. And, when you have that kind of a lead, you got to be able to stomp on it. And I think you can forgive them for missing on the first chance, thinking ahead of themselves. But then you have to okay, we got to get this done. Let's get serious. Let's get, this is what we have to do. I don't think they had that. I don't think the coach had that in his arsenal. And it might have backfired anyway, because if you've been one way all year long and all of a sudden you put on your black hat instead of your white hat, you might turn people off. I don't know what went on in the room, but clearly there was a failure to meet the challenge. And the result was not only did they lose Bertuzzi and Orlov and Hathaway, and then they lose their top two centers and Krejci and Bergeron. Massive hole, a massive hole. They still have good goaltending. They still have a good defense, but the top two center positions being vacated like that does not bode well. I mean, I still think they'll be a playoff team, but unless they have a surprise or make a deal for a top flight centerman, at least one, they're going to have to rebuild that position, and it's not easy to do.
Would you come back and coach? I'm not saying here, or would you consider coming back to coach?
I think the ship has sailed. You know, I'm 71 now. I don't think anybody wants to listen to the old guy. I mean, it's a 24-hour a day proposition, really. You know, you have to be ready to sink your teeth into every possible problem, and there's always one. Yeah, you got to find that fourth line guy that's going to stay with it, that's not going to be ticked off. You got to make sure if the power play is not working, you make an adjustment. You got to be watching video. You know, it's a job for a younger guy than me, and you know, sometimes I fantasize about that, but I don't. It's not in the cards.
What about the broadcast booth, Mike? Would you?
Well, you know, if you can find me somebody who's willing to do it, I still am baffled by that.
As are we. And I'll say,
I've read the quote over and over and over again 1,000 times, probably 1,000 times less than you've read it. What in that quote about it's a perfect hockey environment? If you love hockey, be with your friends, be with your teammates, and no distractions like women. I mean, that's an honest statement. That's all. That's nothing derogatory. There's nothing offensive to women.
Here's the greatest quote. I loved your quote as you explained. You explained what was going on, or what they were trying to correct. It was priceless, but what you said was nothing.
No, you said, Mike, honest, and it is. It's part of, I guess, there's so many now genders, but for the most part, in the time that I was playing or the time that I was broadcasting, the time that I live, men are distracted by women, and women try to distract them at times. It's not, I wasn't meant to be offensive to them. It doesn't mean that they were, you know, they're not good sports writers, or they're not good this or good that. When you're 20 something and you're in great shape and we are renowned at a celebrity status, you're loaded with dough, certain things follow. And trust me, they followed on the road trips and at home. It doesn't matter where. Women were, you know, interested in guys like, you know, Boston Bruin hockey players. And when they're not around, it is less. I mean, and actually it could have referred to wives and children as well. I mean, that's why teams like to put their players in hotel rooms for home games, because they want them to get a good sleep. They don't want to have any distractions. They don't want to have, you know, worried about, you know, the honey-do list. And that's why that took place. So what bothered me more than anything after that comment was, I mean, I got a call, said, you know, we're going to take you off the broadcast tonight, and then we're going to reevaluate. And then they asked me to apologize. I don't know if you saw the article I did with Dan Shaughnessy sort of explaining some of this, but so I said, say whatever you want. You know, I've had to apologize before for different things that I said on the air, you know, mostly, you know, about Ovechkin. Ted Leonsis was crying because I was all over him. And I was rightly all over him because he was playing like one-way guy until he finally figured it out when Barry Trotz came around. So I had to apologize. And so, okay, apologize. I didn't write it. I didn't read it. I didn't say anything. And so the apology came out from NBC. And then the next day, the NHL came out with a statement. Now they have this vice president of inclusivity and whatever other terminology that you have, you know, the touchy-feely that has to make sure everybody does the right thing by diversity and inclusivity kind of stuff. And she made a statement, the league made a statement condemning it as non-inclusive and whatever the hell else they said. And that was sort of the kiss of death. And then I got a call from my boss at NBC and said, we're going to take you off for the rest of the year. We had already been talking about me going to Edmonton because that's where the finals were going to be played in the bubble. But so I said, my first question, of course, was, what about the money? And they said, no, that's fine. I don't know who that is, but
sorry, let's not answer it.
Yeah, well, it's my wife's computer. That's why. Anyway, was I? So then he called me back and said, we're going to do an internal examination of, your behavior. They did this bullshit witch hunt, and then they said, well, we're gonna take you off the air. And I said again, because I had a year left on my contract, and they said, no, we'll pay you that year. I almost wish they hadn't, because I think I would have had a pretty good lawsuit if I hadn't. But
here's the deal, Mike. It's not the fact that we don't know you or like you or all the above. You did a hell of a good job. I mean, you did a terrific job at that, and you were
thanks.
Straightforward, outspoken, and honest, and that's all I can say. You might have crossed the line and offended just about everybody you talked about for all kinds of different reasons. But that was part of what Mike Milbury was all about.
That's what he's supposed to. He's supposed to you have an edge, all right? Nobody else has an edge, and people like to. Well, why do you think Howard Cosell was so popular? Because he had an edge to him, and right. You had an edge to you.
Well, I mean, you're getting it a little bit now. I don't know how long it's going to last, but Papelbon on the Red Sox broadcast has brought some heat to the table, and he's not the wimp that some of those other guys have proven to be. And I just, my role as I felt it as a broadcaster was to bring my experience with me to the game and to comment honestly on things that I saw that were developing, and that was a take no prisoners approach. I didn't intend to offend people, but I intended to explain from my perspective the action on the ice and who was responsible for certain things at certain times, which everybody who watches the game does the same thing in some ways. When you get behind a microphone, a lot of people, well, you've seen the ESPN and TNT broadcasts. I mean, you think Wayne Gretzky's going to tell it like it is? He's not. He doesn't want to offend anybody. And most of them are that. I guess they've got a few guys there that are occasionally come to the table with something that's interesting. But most of the time it's PK Subban and his wild outfits and, not really focused on the game. They're focused more on personality and making it fluff and stuff. So anyway, I did try to reach out to TNT and ESPN, and basically the door was slammed shut. I have no idea who or what is responsible for that, or I can't believe the things that I said. Some of the things that other people have said in the meantime have been 10 times worse than that. But it was a game changer, and I thought I had a few more years left in the tank to do some more broadcasting. It's not like digging a ditch. You have to come to work ready, but I thought I could get another 4 or 5 years out of the broadcasting thing before they kicked me to the curb. But a little earlier than I anticipated, and a little more surprisingly than I thought. But
it's our loss. Your disappointment, our loss.
Well, thanks. I just, but I did, Mike, want to get back into it. I even tried Nesson a couple of years ago, and they had said they had already had a full boat of broadcasters. So I let that pass. I've done a little work with EEI and WMEX here on the South Shore with a couple radio shows on a weekly basis, and that's been kind of fun when the season gets started. I hope to be able to do that again, but the full-time gig seems to have evaded me.
I think you answered my question, because I was going to say, all right, so NBC let you go, what about TNT and ESPN? So that tells me it's coming from the top. It's coming from the league office, right?
That's my interpretation. And I waited. Of course, I'm not stupid. I waited until my final paycheck came, and then I finally called Bettman. And this is like 100% true, even though he'll deny it. And there was a comment about it in the Shaughnessy article I did. I said, did you really think what I said was so offensive? And Gary said, Mike, I don't even remember what the fuck you said. That was an exact quote. Like, he didn't remember what he said, but it only his office, if not him, just poured a whole bunch of cold water on my career. And he didn't remember what I'd said. New day, new age. The woke movement was in full force, and everybody was jumping on the inclusivity bandwagon and the diversity bandwagon. The timing wasn't good. But I mean, I don't think that sin is worthy of a permanent place in hell.
A lot of that stuff was just locker room banter. It's just like stuff you would have been. I mean, I've laughed at some of the things that you said, some of the quotes, the Sinden brother. I thought that was very funny. I thought that was hilarious.
I thought it was funny too. I guess I can see that maybe.
No, I can see that. I can see. Yeah, I can see where. But on the other hand, I thought that was hilarious. And people are going to say, "Well, what are you talking about now?" And there was this Thelma and Louise reference.
Yeah, I said it. Well, the Bruins want to win this game. They have to stay on Thelma and Louise. Oh, I mean, Henrik and Daniel. And you know what? They were nuts about that.
That's not funny.
They were nuts about that in Canada. NBC hired a bodyguard to cover me.
Tell me that's not funny.
Out of control. And the same thing happened in Nashville when, they were in the finals against Pittsburgh. And PK Subban was paired up against Crosby whenever they could do it. And PK, being the prick that he is on the ice, was really giving it to Crosby. So he hit Crosby, and somehow Crosby wound up on top. And he punched him in the head, and he got away with it. And they showed the replay, and I said, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, PK got exactly what he deserved right there. And you would have thought, I got a call the next day at the hotel, because the fans were wild. The Nashville fans were wild that I would insult PK or think that Crosby should get away with a punch to his head. I got a call and said, Mike, we know what hotel you're staying at. We know when you go to the rink, and we're going to get you. And so I hung up, and then about half an hour later, same call. We know where you staying. We know how you get to the rink. So I had to call NBC, and they again hired a bodyguard to protect me. Fortunately, it was the last game of the series. Nashville lost, but I had to move hotels. I had to move to another hotel close to the airport to get out of sight. Who knew? They ever hire broadcast or bodyguards for you guys?
I made comments about a meter maid one night. This guy is the compassion of a meter maid, and I got a call from the husbands of about 5 meter maids and said, "Look, they're waiting for me in the parking lot at Channel 5."
That's a good one.
I'm looking for lovely Rita meter maid, waiting for me at 12:15 as I'm coming out of the building. They didn't get one for me and Lobel because they were hoping somebody would take us out and then they'd be done with us. We wouldn't have to worry about us anymore.
Get that right. All right, what happened at Boston College? That was the Pitt Gladchuk was the.
I would just tell you that my youngest 2 sons went to BC. They're both BC graduates. One's works for Suffolk Construction now, and one doesn't work. He's going to Duke School of Business. And so actually when they were applying, I had some people talking to other people at BC, and would it be a problem because of my past? And they said, you know what? Most of the people here at BC completely understood what happened. What happened was I got a call from Chet Gladchuk. We had a flirtation a year or two earlier when Lenny Siglaski had retired, and I was in assistant GM position, and we flirted a little bit, but then things went south when Cedarchuk took over. And so he called me, and I thought, I missed coaching at that point. I was, I had a couple of years, and I saw the team was not going in the right direction, or I didn't think it was. And I thought, well, now's a good time. I had originally planned to just be in management, wanted to be a manager. And at that time, Harry had sent me to Buffalo to meet with Jerry. And I, one-on-one with Jerry is interesting. And I said to him, we have to spend more money on this roster. And he said, we'll spend more money when we have a new building. And I said, but still, we need to spend a little higher percentage of our profits on the product. And he said, I like the percentages just the way they are. So that was sort of telltale for me. I mean, Harry was great at making money for that team and having a competitive team. But that didn't sit particularly well with me. And, now he lets people spend to the cap because there is a cap. At that time, Detroit was spending money willy-nilly, and so were the Rangers. You'd be ridiculous payrolls, and none of them paid off. But anyway, I got the call from him, and we met, and I decided, okay, I can coach. This is a long term. This is, what am I now? Early 40s or something like that. And, Lenny had been there through thick and thin for 1,000 years, and great building, great campus, and but I was making $325,000, I think, at the time as assistant general manager. I negotiated with Gladchuk to get to $150,000 a year, which was the highest paid coach in hockey, I think, at that time. In fact, Jack Parker, after I left, wanted to thank me for making sure the salary structure was changed. But I got there, and I was anticipating being able to recruit in my first season like 8 players with scholarships. And in the first weeks, kids and mothers and fathers came into my office and said, with letters from Steve Cedarchuk saying, this is the commitment this organization has made. I mean, I'm talking about not just 8, I'm talking about 12, 15 kids, like with parents who like one after the other, and parents in tears. Like it was, and I went to him and he said, I'll handle it. Let me handle it. Gladchuk wouldn't let me get near it. And it just kept going. I finally went to a lawyer. I said, what's the deal here? And I don't know if I got the right advice, but he said, you could have some liability here too if these scholarships aren't on it. And I said, okay, that's it. That's it for me. So I resigned. So I went from making $325,000 to making $150,000 to now being out of work. and it was based on principle. And Father Monin, who was president of the school at the time, asked me to come back in, wanted me to rethink my position, and they were going to straighten it out. And I said to him in that meeting, I said, Father, you're in violation of so many NCAA regulations that it's hard to comprehend. And he said, I'll let my people tell me when we're in violation. Like, what am I? If you're asking me to come back to coach, aren't I? I'm the one that had to read the rules. I'm the one that saw these letters. And, so that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Gene DiFilippo, I think it was, became the new AD. And I went with Nate Greenberg, and we went out to dinner with Gene, and he said it cost them millions of dollars and 5 years to clean up the mess. And in the meantime, Jerry York came in and took over, took the hits, but he was coming back home. He was in a better position. It was a clean slate. And so he owes me for getting him into the Hall of Fame, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Absolutely. Brought him here from Bowling Green.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, he was a good coach at Bowling Green, put into a great spot here and had a great career. But I mean, I thought that was going to be me, and it wasn't. But listen.
Well, you know what? I don't think you were the only one that had issues with Chet Gladchuk.
Yeah, I can't speak to everybody else's issues, just mine. But I wound up going to work for ESPN, and because I was familiar with the labor situation, I negotiated a contract. No matter what, I would get paid, whether there was a lockout or a strike, and people at ESPN didn't really take it seriously. And so what happens that fall is there's a work stoppage, and it went on until January, and I kept getting paid. We wound up doing one pretty good show actually on Russian hockey for ESPN, but pretty much just collected a paycheck until the beginning of the year. And then Don Maloney from New York got a hold of me, and I wound up signing with the Islanders as a head coach. That was a rocky time at best, but Don was fired in December of that year, and Darcy Regier was his assistant, and they sort of put Darcy and I said, we didn't get along very well. And I said, I'm not going to be happy if I don't get this GM job. And they gave it to me, and I became GM and coach, which was a huge mistake. I was going to practice, coming off the ice and running in my sweatsuit down to the GM's office to do GM stuff. So at the end of that first half season, when I was doing that, I went to ask some people about it, and somebody hooked me up with Bill Parcells. And, the guy that, if you want me to cook, you got to let me buy the groceries, right?
Yep.
So he said, you can do it. You could, if you have enough people around you, support staff, he said, he said, you kind of remind me a little of myself, kind of brash and, take no prisoners kind of thing. So I did it, and I did both poorly, to be honest with you. And the team was dreadful. We can talk about ownership later in that situation, but it was a nightmare scenario. But anyway, so I'm driving about 5 years later. Now I'm just the GM, and I'm listening to Mike Francesa interview Parcells on his radio show in New York on The Fan. And he said to Parcells, Bill, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? He said, I never would have done both jobs. Thanks for the advice, coach. I was in my car by myself, shaking my head like, what the hell? But anyway.
Now we know. Do you remember right after you resigned from BC, there was the Havlicek fishing tournament, and you went into the hot tub. All these guys were out the hot tub, out at the pool, and you wanted to fight me for something I said on the air. You said, let's go right now, you and me, right here.
Okay, own it up. What was it?
I don't even know.
You said, what did you say about me on the air after I left?
I probably said some asshole thing that you were likely to say about me. That's all. Anyway, I don't know. I was in a match going from one spot, looking to be the GM of the Bruins, maybe, to being the head coach at BC, to being unemployed with 4 kids at home and bills to pay. So you made some wise ass comment, which I don't recall.
I'm
standing by that.
That never would have happened if I'd have gone to Harvard. That's what you probably said.
I said you were impulsive, but
yeah, that's right. That's the word you used.
Impulsive.
I was not impulsive. I was not. I was wealthy. Do you think I was doing that cavalierly? I mean, this was a huge life change, too, in a matter of months, going from the Bruins and great relationship with Harry. I think I stung him there when I left for a while. And, we're fortunately past that. We chat periodically. He's he was great to me. He was always a good guy to work for. And we never talked about Harry's coaching, by the way, just to get segue back to him. When he came to the bench, first of all, the toughest practices I ever had were with Harry. I mean, you talk about skating. You know, after he left the Bruins, he left the Bruins in 70 after they won the cup, right?
Yeah.
And he told me the story. He went in to negotiate. I guess Milt was the GM at the time, right? And they win the cup, and Harry goes in and he's looking for a $5,000 raise. And Milt is holding back. And Weston Adams was the owner. So Harry went in to see Milt, and he's leaving the office, and he's a little disappointed. And he sees Weston Adams, and Weston Adams looks at him and said, "Harry, I hope you like it wherever you go." But he came back in 72. Before he came back in 72, of course, he coached the Canadian national team in the Soviet series, which was one of the great series of all time, if not the greatest series of all time. And, you know, down in the hole after 4 games, you know, and remember the game in Vancouver, game 4, when the Russians beat them again. And there was that tearful Espo moment on the after the game. We're trying, right? And then they go to Russia, and there's minutes left in the game, and it's tied. And they think the series is going to go, you know, to a tie. And the Russians came over and explained to Alan Eagleson and everybody else that, no, the Russians will win the series based on goal differential. And that, of course, Henderson scores the goal that made Canada happy. And it was a great series. And, you know, it's the series where Bobby Clark two-handed Harlamov, their best player, offensive player, with a hack that came from Minneapolis to Moscow. It was just vicious, and knocked him out of the series. But Harry coached that team, but getting ready for that, he said he knew how good they were. Most of the Canadians were not in shape. They didn't train hard. And he read books by Tarasov and, you know, how they trained. And he watched some great video of Tarasov, who was a fabulous guy and a great coach, bubbly, effervescent kind of a guy. And their training methods were way ahead of Canadian and American standards. And so he knew it was going to be a difficult run. And then fortunately for him, he was able to regain his footing in Boston as the general manager. And when he coached, he not only was he tough and made sure everybody was in shape. He told me that 3 things that you're responsible for are conditioning, discipline, and motivation. Now, conditioning's pain in the ass, but it's easy enough to do, right? You're playing the right practice. Discipline, it's also a pain in the ass, but you got to have it. But the art form is motivation. You know, finding ways to get people ready to play every game in a course of an 82-game season. And that's why, I mean, he said to me once, you know, Mike, the season and the games it's not like bridge. You can't pass. And there was a great quote, I thought, from him. It's not like playing bridge. You can't pass on any given game. You got to show up and play the game. And he made sure that on a nightly basis, there was a reason to play the game. When I was coaching for Harry, my first season, we were in first place. We won a game at Hartford, and we had a game the next night against Calgary. Calgary was a really good team. And this was after Calgary, we had 4 days off for the All-Star break. So we win the game in Hartford. I get a couple hours of sleep, and I go in to watch tape. And I gave everybody the day off, the morning off, no morning skate, just come to the rink and be ready to play. And I'm watching tape prior to this Calgary game, and I get a call from Dale Hamilton, Harry's secretary. It said, "Harry would like to see you." I didn't even know if he knew that I was in the building, but I mean, I was the only guy on the staff that was in the building. So I trot up into his office and, we sit down and he closes the door shut. And I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I have first place overall, just about at the All-Star break. And he said to me, "So you think it's fucking over, don't you? You think this is all over. You're already on holiday. And if you're already on fucking holiday, how do you think those guys are feeling about themselves? They've already gone to the Caribbean or Florida or wherever the hell else they're going." He said, "Get your ass down in the locker room and get those guys ready to play the goddamn game tonight." I had a sweat coming down all over the place after leaving that meeting. And at 5:00 that night, everybody's in for the 7:00 game. Closed the door, locked it, went up to everybody, screamed at him, "You fucking guys think it's all over. You're on vacation already." His words.
Good one.
We had a hell of a game. We won up in a tie with Calgary, and it was a good team at the time. And but I swear to God that there's no chance we would have played as well as we played that night had he not just given me the nudge and had I not passed on the nudge to the players. But it's all about, a responsibility to your teammates, a responsibility to the fans to play hard every night. And I think if you said one thing about Harry's teams for the decades of his tenure was they played hard almost every damn night. And he wouldn't tolerate it. He wouldn't tolerate that. He passed that down to everybody that played for him. And it's a shame, when I think about my career as a coach or player with the Bruins, I think it was, 77, 4 games short, 76, 78, 2 games short, 79, I guess you'd call it 5 games short. When Terry was coaching, I was there too, and I was in the minor leagues. They came up short by like 4 games. By the end of it, I measured 5 near misses that we had, and a total of an average of 3 games per year. I'd have 5 rings. But that was Harry's doing to get everybody to play hard. He took a lot of heat. I don't think he ever got the respect that he deserved. Everybody wanted him to make the big splash at the deadline, and no better example than how that can backfire than what you're looking at today's Boston Bruins. Just running out and throwing money at somebody you think is an older veteran that somebody's trying to unload for some whatever value they can get. And he was reluctant to do that. He did it a couple times, but
here's the truth. You're so damn interesting to listen to because everybody can relate to how you feel about Harry, because I think a lot of people.
He's impulsive. He's impulsive.
No, that's we have a little of the same stuff in common, right? So, I don't get in as many fights as he did or have as many penalty minutes as he did, but then really was as good behind the microphone as he was. But we don't do this for free, Mike. So just hang on a little bit, Milbury.
Yeah. I did have some pretty good fights, but I was not on the list of tough guys.
Yeah, well,
I was way down the list.
Well, I did not way down. Now, come on, you might have been 4th or 5th, but
I had we not against.
Let me do this commercial first, okay? We just
a damn commercial. Jesus.
Hang on just a second, all right? Because if I don't, I'll be out of the.
What's my fee today?
Oh, big. You guys have a big question coming up after this, okay? So hang on for a second. We're talking about Cold Springs RV summer sell-off, and it's heating up here in August. First come, first serve for the must-move deals. You didn't do commercials, did you, during your broadcast opportunity?
Nope, I didn't.
No. Okay, well, there you go.
I'm going to find out why we didn't do them either.
Go. Stop it, Lynch, okay? Stop it. Cold Springs RV is making room for the 2024 models. They got to move out the current inventory of the 2023 units. Travel trailers, motorhomes, and pop-ups. The question's coming up in a minute, Milbury. Hang on. The deals will not last. So get to the summer sell-off event right now. Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire, which is just west of Manchester, north of Haverhill, online or coldspringsrv.com. You'll be happy you did, and you'll be happy that we were able to pass that along. And now for the question of the week.
All right, Mike. Cold Springs RV. Remember John Madden didn't fly. He had a bus. They call it the Madden Cruiser.
Yeah.
Well, they're in the process of building one for Lobel. It's going to be
Yeah.
called the Lobel Cruiser. So we're gonna have each guest on the show have the Lobel Cruiser for a week, and you get to drive it cross country. But you have to pick one person, past, present, alive, or dead, that rides shotgun with you cross country. Somebody you'd like to have a conversation with, somebody you'd like to listen to. Who would you like riding shotgun with, Mike Milbury?
I probably would say Winston Churchill.
Oh, whoa, good one.
Oh,
Very cerebral, as a matter of fact.
You ever go to London and see his war rooms and the underground?
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
really fascinating.
Unbelievable.
It's really incredible, and I'm sure you've watched The Darkest Hour, the movie. It's a great movie. I mean, it's fun to watch. And, I asked Grapes about that, watching the movie, as I thought it was great. I mean, Gary Oldman wins the Academy Award, and Grapes said, they made him look like an old wimp. I don't know how he drew that conclusion, but anyway, he'd be pretty fascinating to listen to, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Good pick. We've had all kinds across the board, huh? Belichick, Brady, Parcells.
Speaking of Parcells, when Terry Glenn sprained his ankle, and somebody asked Parcells at a press conference when he was going to return, he said, "Oh, she's feeling a little bit better. I think she's going to come back." And he didn't lose his job. Something like that, right?
Yeah, different time, different era. It's really we become I got to choose. No, I don't have to choose my words. I'm looking for the right word. We become soft.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really too bad. It's just. I mean, I don't know.
Too sensitive, too caring, too
sensitive. And nobody wants to work as hard anymore. I mean, this remote stuff is weird. I know the COVID had a big impact on it, but I've tried to explain to my kids that work is fun. Work has to be. It's what you do with your life. It's got to be fun. I mean, I'm lucky that the things that I had to do were certainly easier and more fun than selling insurance, but you still can be good at that job and you can have fun at it and take pride in it. But we can't even get people to go to work. We don't even make them go to the office.
My kids are the same way. They hate going. They said, "Oh my God, this week we have to go into the office 3 days." I said, 3 days this week, and then you don't have to go in for another 2 weeks. It's ridiculous.
I mean, but it was fun to go to the office and hang out at the water cooler, be distracted by women.
I had Jack Edwards for a couple of years. That was so much fun.
That's a distraction.
Oh my God. That's a huge distraction. Don't get me started.
Oh. I got to read one more spot here before.
As a matter of fact, I was out to dinner with George Gray last night, Michael.
You were. Well, George, I hope Lobel picked up the check last night, but I
took up my half. Okay, I picked up my half. How's that?
Your half? Okay, that's fair enough. Well, if you're thinking about a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the great George Gray at Lexington Toyota and tell him Lobel is picking up the check from now on.
We talked about Oppenheimer and Barbie. That's the two things we talked about more than that.
Last week, Lobel comes on the show and he tells Fred Lim was on with us, and he said that he went and saw Barbie the night before the show. Now, would you ever?
What's wrong with that?
Would you ever anticipate Bob Lobel going to see Barbie?
It took my daughters, Mike. Okay, calm down. Everybody, calm down about this.
Okay, I guess I can understand that to a certain extent, but how was it, Bob?
It was different. It was different than Oppenheimer, okay? But I would say this, there are different messages in each movie that would resonate to anybody that went to those either one of those shows. They're different.
Oppenheimer, Mike?
Did I what?
Did you see Oppenheimer?
I have not. No.
You know, why do they have to make movies that are like 6 days long?
I know.
It was a long movie. I'll say
Why
that.
can't you just make it like I want to be entertained. I don't want to be.
Did you see it? Did you go?
I liked it. I didn't think it was the greatest movie I ever saw.
It was 3 hours. It was 3 hours. That's a long movie.
Long movie, and they could have shortened it up by a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And I would have liked it more. But I mean, there were some good performances. But I want my movies to be an hour and 40, hour and 45. Get a good laugh, get a good cry. Yeah, short attention span.
Absolutely.
That's good.
So what's next?
Well, no, I was just
I don't know.
talked
We've
about.
been to local sportscasters. Who was your favorite when you were around here?
Don't say John Dennis because that's a loaded question.
Where is he now?
Florida.
Well,
You want to come on with us? Mention that?
I don't know. I will say this though, that you guys in your prime it was a good era of broadcasting, sports broadcasting. It was a little competition going on between everybody. It was people were.
I think it's over. That era is over. Everybody's got phones. Everybody knows what the stories are before they even turn on the news at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, I know. Like your kids, my kids are glued to it. You know, you're sitting and watching a movie at home and everybody's got the phone out. Like, drop the damn thing. Yeah. Just like watch the movie. Can't you not? I mean, it is addicting for those guys. I mean, I can put my phone down. I mean, I got to figure out where the hell it is now. But these guys are just, and they do everything on it. Like they taught me how to deposit a check with my phone. Like I'm saying, what the hell? I deposit the check? I want to go to the bank and I want to get my deposit slip that says more money in than I just had a few minutes ago.
Yeah, get a lollipop and come out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got a check from an insurance company yesterday, and it was a check in my email. And you know, you could you definitely can do some things on the computer and send it to your bank, but you know, they had a option to print the check, and then you could just use like a regular check and deposit it. And that's what I did. You know, I want to see my check.
Of course you do. Because you're old school. That's why you're old school.
Okay, let's talk about the greatest players of all time.
You go. You're the man.
What sport?
This sport, my sport. You know, I'm probably going to get trouble. I get in trouble for this when I say this, but I'm used to that. The most impossible player for me to defend was Mario Lemieux. Huge wingspan, crazy wingspan. And if he didn't have a back problem or cancer during the course of his career, he probably wins another cup or two. But we did everything we possibly could to defend against him, and there was no defense against him. There just wasn't, you know. We had they had a power play, and we have a guy stand right beside him. And so it was, instead of 5-on-4, it was 4-against-3, which reduces the odds in open space. And, you know, he'd do something crazy. He'd come to the front of the net with his shadow and stand beside another defenseman. So it was like two guys on him. And that confused the hell out of our team. But anyway, he was a magnificent player. And number 2 on the list, maybe I could separate this as a defenseman versus a forward, of course, is Orr. Because watching him, I never played a game with him. You know, when I got there in 74, he was pretty dinged up. I segue here. My first practice was in Fitchburg. You know, I had no contract. I'd been called up to play for the Braves for a few games on a tryout. And then I finally got an invitation at camp. Grapes tells me he's responsible for that because the kid I went to school with lived in Rochester where he lived and said, make sure you look out for Milbury. My name wasn't on the list, according to Grapes, and he got me on the list. Anyway, we go to training camp out in Fitchburg, and they have the training camp fiesta, I guess you'd call it. It wasn't just it was at the international golf course. And so it was a tennis and golf tournament with the players and a few celebrities and whoever else was there. And I get there to play tennis, and we're having lunch, and there's like silver buckets stuffed with Heineken, and red wine is flowing. And it's 12 o'clock in the middle of the day. Like, and I had training camp, first training camp tomorrow. So I'm looking around. We play tennis, come back for dinner. There's one band on the patio over here. Another band takes up over here. Everybody is like this lobster and caviar and whatever. Just the most, players were stumbling around. They came to training camp to get in shape. They didn't train to go to training camp like I did. We went to college, and so you learned how to stretch, and you learned how to warm up, and you knew how to do interval training and that sort of stuff. These guys just showed up, and some of them had jobs in the summertime. Anyway, this was their first group outing together, and they took full advantage of it. Anyway, I got out of there, and my group was on at 10, and the first group, the A group, was on at 8, and I was there at 7:45 because I wanted to watch my heroes. I was 18 when they won in 1970. Here I am 4 years later. These larger than life people. So I'm in the locker room, and I'm trying to look for some sticks and stuff, and I see Esposito in the corner. It's like just about 8 o'clock, and Espo fidgeting around and doing stuff with his sticks, and in walks Orr, and I just sort of shrink back away from two of them into the men's room over here, but I can hear what's going on. He said, "Phil, get your ass on the ice. We got a brand new coach. We didn't win a championship last year, and you're going to be late for the first fucking day of practice. Get out there." Oh my God. I was just, what's this all about? It was just, but I practiced with him once, and he just twirled the puck over and around, skated past 6 or 7 people 3 or 4 times in a row. And then he'd pass it over to me, and I'd slam it off the glass. It was like dreamland to play with him. Yeah. And nobody needs any tutorial on his greatness. I mean, his speed and his incredible courage, maybe recklessness at time that caused him to go to areas that would leave him vulnerable, and thus his career cut short. But what a meteoric type of a career this guy had. And so he's on my list, top defenseman, with Lemieux top forward. Second top forward for me behind Lemieux is Messier. It's not Gretzky, because if you remember, they won 4 in a row, or 4 in 5 years, I think. They played together in Edmonton before Wayne got traded to Los Angeles. And then Messier won again, and he won again. I think he won one more with Edmonton when they played against O'Reilly's coach team, and he won one more playing against my team. And he won another one
Rangers
in New York.
Yeah.
So if he was matched up against Gretzky, he'd punch him in the mouth and beat him into submission. And that's why I have him at the second spot, and then Wayne, who was a great player and gifted, but fluffy numbers. And he believe when it was 7-2, he wasn't stopping. He was looking for the 8th goal, or his 8th point of the night. But he was a great player.
Don't you think Howe was like that? Gordie Howe was like that?
I played against Gordie when he was in Hartford playing with his sons.
Yeah.
And it was a shadow of himself. And so I can't match up with him, but I heard he was that way. But he couldn't skate. You just can't. Those errors have to be judged differently, because the abilities of the players have just grown exponentially. The training, the skating, the equipment, everything is so different now than it was then. But in my time and the guys that I really played against, those were the guys that I think were the greatest players of that generation. And I think the greatest goaltender for me was Marty Brodeur. You know, he was just, I mean, I only met him once or twice in some meetings, league meetings, but bubbly personality, big in goal, gamer, so that's my all-time list.
Oh, good. Pretty good, Bob. Speechless, Lobel?
No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that matches my list perfectly. You're the best, Milbury. It's great.
Well, switching sports, you guys must have seen Air. It's good, isn't it?
It is very good. I liked it.
The Lakers movie with John C. Reilly, which is also good.
Part 1 last night.
It's a little different, but
yeah,
I'll leave you with my one Larry Bird story, who, by the way, got into remember that fight he got into with
Chelsea's.
Yeah,
right.
The guy he fought was Mike Harlow, who lives down here in Colgate guy, right?
Yeah.
Tough as nails. He was tough as nails, Mike Harlow. And, but anyway, speaking of the Havlicek fishing tournament, they used to take a charter from Logan to Martha's Vineyard, or depending on the venue, or Nantucket. And, I used to see the Celtics all the time, and but Mikhail used to come down and have beers with us, but we never saw a bird. But I got on the plane, and I'm sitting on the plane, and he walks on the plane, and he looks at me, and these are the only 2 words he's ever spoken to me. He said, "Hi, Mike." And my heart went a flutter.
Really?
Bird knows who the hell I am.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. It was
pretty cool. And he almost got into a fight at the Havlicek fishing tournament too.
Yeah, that's right.
That
one easily, but I clearly held back my impetuosity.
I would have paid money for that.
Everybody jumped out of the hot tub because they thought that 2 of us were going to be going at it right there.
I paid money to see that one. All right, guys. Mike, you did a great job. Thank you so much for being with us.
Stay well.
Yeah, you too, bud.
Good to see you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
All right.